Welcome, Cooper.
Thanks, Rob. Can you all hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. Love playing the Zoom games. Hi,
Yes.
everybody. As Rob said, my name is Cooper, and I'm a senior security researcher at the EFF Threat Lab. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to get your YARA for nothing and your malware for free. So first, a bit about myself. I am a new parent, as you may be able to tell from the terrible joke in my title. And as such, I don't have a lot of spare time. And also, like the great Perl programmer, Perl inventor, Larry Wall, I believe that laziness is a virtue of a good programmer. As in the quality that makes you write a program to automate a task or write a labor-saving program that you do all the time. And that's going to be sort of the subject of what we talk about today. If you're not familiar with EFF, we are a nonprofit. We are based mostly in San Francisco, and we defend civil liberties as they intersect with technology. So this means that your right to freedom of expression and your right to privacy exist on technology and online as well. And we make sure to defend that through litigation strategies, through technology, and through activism. And we've been doing this for 30 years. In fact, this year is our 30th anniversary, so we have quite a lot of experience. And our newest initiative is the team that I'm part of, which is called the Threat Lab. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So the Threat Lab's goal is to look at malware and technologies that target at-risk people. This is activists, human rights defenders, journalists, domestic abuse victims, immigrants, sex workers, political dissidents, anybody who is at risk of repression from their government or from groups in society more powerful than them. And what are some of the goals of malware or technology that targets these people? We see malware technology that wants to gather intelligence on opposition groups or on protest groups, spying on dissidents who have left your country when you can no longer spy on them using the national phone company or other methods of spying that you have within your borders. Sometimes you want to, or not you, sometimes the actors want to blackmail people. And this is usually in service of silencing them or harassing them, basically stifling their freedom of expression. And sometimes you want to locate and capture them. Sometimes you want to put them in jail, typically to shut them up or to interrogate them. So these are the sorts of things we're looking at. And why do we do this? We do this because there's a lot of really great cybersecurity and antivirus companies out there, and a lot of my colleagues here on stage work for those companies, and those companies are great. They're doing really important work, but they mostly care about the types of malware that affect their customers, which are things like ransomware, things like banking trojans. These are super important to look at, but the types of malware that really affect the people that we're worried about are things like remote access trojans or other technologies that are trying to spy on them. And these people often can't afford a security team. Sometimes they can't even afford antivirus. So we get to, by virtue of working for a nonprofit, we get to care about the types of malware that infringe on civil liberties and human rights of at-risk people. And we get to spend all of our time working on that because we don't have to meet the bottom line. We think of ourselves basically as the security team for the people who can least afford it and who are most at need of one. So our goals are, first and foremost, to protect people. We want to make sure that people are safe, that people are able to express themselves freely, that people aren't being spied on, that people aren't being kidnapped. And we want to broaden these communities that we're a part of. We want to broaden our community's understanding of the threats that they might be facing, who the threat actors are, what their capabilities are, what their goals are, and how they can defend themselves against these threat actors. We also want to expose bad faith actors, corporations, governments, cyber mercenaries, anybody that is enabling these attacks or executing these attacks or paying for these attacks. We want to find them and expose them and shame them, because we don't think that this is how any organization should be operating. We don't think that technology should be being used to violate human rights or freedom of expression. And of course, because we're primarily a law firm at EFF, where the lawyers like to think of us as a law firm with a bunch of hackers attached. I like to think of us as a bunch of hackers with a team of lawyers attached. But we do want to make better laws. We want to make better global norms, and we want to, generally not do the same work again and again, but actually make the world a better place. So I'll talk about a couple of the campaigns that we've worked on. One is the Coalition Against Stalkerware, which was spearheaded by my boss, Eva Galperin. And she has been working on, so this all started with a tweet that she sent out, which was, if you've been the victim of domestic abuse from somebody who has claimed that they could hack you, please get in touch with me. And unfortunately, thousands of people got in touch with her over the course of the next year. And what she found was that a lot of people were being harassed with what we call spouseware or stalkerware, which is essentially a rat or a remote access Trojan that sits on your phone or your computer and collects all of the normal things that you would expect a rat to collect: messages, keystrokes, contacts, locations, etc. But these particular rats, this stalkerware, was being sold by companies that were advertising it as a way to track on your, keep tabs on your spouse or your kids, and track what they're doing. And it turned out that antivirus companies were classifying these as potentially unwanted programs, but not actually flagging them as malicious. And this is because they weren't really sure how these were being used, and whether or not this was something they should track. So Eva started a long campaign to get the vast majority of stalkerware signatures actually into antivirus, and that's going quite well so far. With several different antivirus companies, I think starting with Kaspersky and Lookout, started actually detecting stalkerware and warning users. So that's been great. Another campaign we worked on is called Dark Caracal. This was a nation-state campaign that we found based on some earlier work we did from a campaign coming out of Kazakhstan called Operation Mantle. It turned out that the same actor was targeting people, civilians in Lebanon, and we found this through some threat hunting, some YARA rules, and mostly through help from some colleagues of ours at Lookout Mobile Security. Dark Caracal was a mobile rat that was spying on his victims, and a desktop rat called Banduk that was sending information back to a CNC. Unfortunately for the author, all of that information on the CNC was publicly downloadable. And so we quickly set up a curl script to download all of it and parse it, looking for victims. And when we did that, we actually found a bunch of test data that the author had uploaded, or that the person running the campaign had uploaded. And in that test data, there was a cluster of Wi-Fi access points, all pointing to a specific building in the heart of Lebanon, in the heart of Beirut in Lebanon. And when we looked at that building on Google Maps, and then when somebody looked at it in person, what we discovered is that building was the headquarters of Lebanon's General Directorate of General Security, which is basically Lebanon's FBI, CIA, and border control all rolled into one. So, wow, that's pretty wild. The same actor that was spying on political opposition and independent journalists in Kazakhstan is also working out of the GDGS building and spying on Lebanese civilians. And what we figured out was that this is a contractor based in Lebanon who is doing work for the Lebanese government, for the Kazakhstan government, and also moonlighting in cybercrime in his spare time. So that's the sort of thing that we do. The work we do runs a wide range. We also write some tools. And we also look at street level surveillance things like IMSI catchers, license plate readers, and other technologies that are used to surveil people as they go about their everyday business. So what is our typical process? Usually we receive a sample. We start with that, and that comes from contacts that we have in various countries, people that are part of these groups that we like to work with, or people in the security community that work with these groups. And they'll either receive a malicious email or a malicious text message with a link, or some friend of theirs where they'll send it to them and they'll send it to us. And so we get a sample. And then we triage the sample because we get a lot of things that are not especially of interest to us. A lot of malware traffic on the internet is things like ransomware and banking trojans and spam, right? And other sort of the background noise of the internet. And those things are important. I don't mean to diminish the impact of those types of malware. But those types of malware are also pretty effectively dealt with by other tools, by antivirus. And those are things that we can train people to avoid. So once we triage the sample, we then, if it looks of interest, we put it through the rest of our stack: dynamic analysis, static analysis. Ideally, we typically try to get to attribution because, as I said before, we want to name and shame the bad actors. And then we write a report so that we can better inform our communities. And what I want to talk about today is specifically the triage part of my job. So the goals of triaging a sample are, as I said before, we want to determine if the sample is already known, because that can save us a lot of time, right? If it's a ransomware sample, if it's Ryuk or something like that, we want to know about that, because then we can quickly say, okay, this is ransomware. Here's how you can protect yourself against this. If we want to determine if the sample is sort of crimeware, spray and pray, right? Or if it's targeted. And sometimes we want to scan a possibly infected computer for samples to then go further investigate. So we started out triaging by hand, and this is as you might imagine, very slow, laborious process. You almost end up having to, start doing the reverse engineering just to triage something. You can, of course, run strings on it. You can upload it to VirusTotal. You can run it through a sandbox and look at what it does, but that takes quite a while. But luckily, we have this amazing, wonderful pattern matching Swiss Army knife called YARA. And triaging with YARA is much faster. It's like a bullet train compared to the hand car. What we found triaging with YARA is that we can load a number of different rule sets for that will identify specific malware, rule sets that will identify different cryptography constants, and rule sets that will generally tell us, okay, is this worth further investigation, or is this not something we really need to look at? Can we quickly identify this file? So in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm a total YARA noob. I've written a couple of dozen rules, but the other people that I'm sharing this stage with are much more experienced at YARA than me. I rarely come across brand new samples. And when I do, I, of course, write a YARA rule for them. But I don't want to if I don't have to. And usually there's a good YARA rule already out there. Because as I said, I'm fundamentally lazy. I don't want to do the work that somebody has already done. And if there's already a perfectly good YARA rule out there for what I'm looking for, why should I write my own? And I can save time. As I said, I don't have a lot of time. So yeah, my time is limited. There's a lot of malware out there. But luckily, as we've already seen, there's a ton of great YARA rules out there. As Joe said very eloquently, we can take the amazing YARA rules that other people have written, combine it with the YARA rules that we've written, which may be of varying quality, and put those all together for a really comprehensive rule set. So in the spirit of not reinventing the wheel, I want to point out a couple of amazing open source repositories of YARA rule sets. And the best one that I've found is this repository from Inquest, who we've mentioned before today, called Awesome YARA. So this is a GitHub repository, or it's more of a GitHub document that links to a bunch of other repositories. And it has 40 or 50 rule sets that are all pretty great and all worth a look. And I'll call out a few of my favorites here. So there's the Apple OS X rule set, so EFF, and also just a lot of the people that we work with are running Apple devices, are running Mac laptops. And the Apple OS X rule set is a fantastic little set of rules for looking for OS X malware. A lot of YARA rules are looking for Windows specific stuff. And if you are dealing with OS X endpoints, this is a great place to start. Patrick Wardle also has some really great rule sets for OS X. If you're looking for that, I highly recommend checking those out. And Citizen Lab, so since our bread and butter is nation states targeting dissidents and activists, of course, there's no, the Citizen Lab are sort of the first in the game there. And they have a good set of rule sets. They've been slacking a little the past couple of years in adding to that set, but it's still a really great corpus of rules and super helpful for finding when an already known actor is reusing some malware attacking a new victim. So this is definitely worth taking a look at. There's the Mike SXRS YARA Rules collection, which is sort of another, like Awesome YARA Rules, it's another meta collection. It's a collection of collections. And it, in fact, contains a lot of the same collections as the Awesome YARA Rules collection. But this is definitely worth checking out. You'll get over 4,000 rules. And it's really worth looking through if you're just looking for a ton of YARA rules to play with. There's also the YARA Rules Project's official repo, the YARA Project official repo. And this is a large collection of really nicely curated rules that are updated by the community and work great. Florian Roth, of course, the YARA madman, has an amazing set of rules. And if you really want to see some top quality rules, it's worth looking through his. And the x64 debug rules are ones that I use a lot. These are fantastic for identifying packers, identifying cryptography, not cryptocurrency, never cryptocurrency. Useful for identifying cryptography constants and getting more info on the malware that you're looking at. So that's just 6 of the 40 or 50 rules that I mentioned, or rule sets that I mentioned are on Awesome YARA. And you might be lazy like me, and you might say, but Cooper, I don't want to download and dig through almost 50 sets of YARA rules. That sounds like a chore, and I don't have the time for that. But don't worry, I got you. I also don't have the time to do that again and again. So I wrote a tool, and it's called Yaya, which stands for Yet Another YARA Automaton in the Grand Tradition of yet another acronym. Yaya is written in Go and uses Go YARA, thanks to Hilco for that. It downloads open source rule sets from Awesome YARA. It'll keep them up to date for you. You can have it ignore problematic rule sets, ones that are too noisy or have too many false positives. You can add your own rule sets to it. and you can run scans with it. I wrote it in Go, just made my last commit yesterday, and I'm now going to sacrifice a chicken and hope that this demo goes well. Oh, good, I pre-recorded it, so it should go well. That would be shocked if it didn't go well at this point. So as I mentioned, it's written in Go, and you can install it with the typical Go tools. I hope that you all can see this video. I don't think I optimized my sharing for full screen. So it's written in Go. It's open source. You can take a look at it on GitHub. I'm also pretty new to Go. Python is typically my language of choice, but I've been wanting to learn it. So I decided to write this tool in Go. It's a good language so far. So Yayo lets you update the rule sets, edit to ban or add rule sets, and lets you run a scan. So right now we're going to do a git pull, and I'll run Yaya update, which does a git pull of all of the rule sets and make sure they're all up to date. And then after it pulls them all, it will scan each of them for YARA rules and load them into our database, which is a SQLite backend. All of the rules and the database are stored in a .yaya directory in your home folder. Right now, this only works on Linux, and I haven't tested it on Windows yet, but that's definitely on my to-do list. I think it should be able to work on Windows. So now that the update is done, we can next add a new rule set. This is the Paste Hunter rule set from Kev the Hermit, which is a rule set for threat hunting on Pastebin that does a really great job. So we're going to add that, and then we can enable or disable specific rule sets here. So I'm going to enable the x64 debug signatures, disable the YARA forensics, and YARA project official repo. And now we can run a scan on this folder of infected samples that I have. And it's going to compile each of the rule sets. Sometimes we get too many matches. Maybe Hulu can help me out with that. It's going to compile each of the rule sets and run the scan against all the files in that directory recursively. And then once it's done, we'll have some nice output here with each file and the set of rules that matched. And we've also written the output to a JSON file, which you can then import into other tools that you're using in your pipeline. And back to the slideshow. So that chicken did not die in vain. Thank you, chicken. We appreciate your sacrifice. So potential uses. You can put this in your email scanning pipeline. You can once you've extracted the attachments or quarantined them, you could scan it with this to get some telemetry. You could scan a possibly infected server or client device with it. Although if you're going to do that, I would recommend using a subset of rules because some of these are quite noisy. You can scan cloud storage uploads if you have a open S3 bucket that you're allowing people to upload files to. You could scan each of those as they come in. Or you could use it for what we use, which is to quickly triage and classify new samples. As I said, it's open source, so please file bugs and add features if you like it. Some future work that we intend to do are, of course, always to improve performance. I'd like to be able to scan processes and memory, and have more output formats if people find that useful. XML, CSV, tell me what you find useful for your workflow, and we'll add an output format. We want to be able to parse virus total specific commands and at least ignore them and not fail. A thing that I would definitely like to do is automatically disable noisy rules or rules that have too many hits and too many false positives. And to quickly touch on that, actually, Vitaly has some great advice. One of the ways that I test my rule sets or test other open source rule sets that I find is to run them against a corpus of known goodware and known badware and see how many false positives hit, how many rules are matching too many things, and how many rules are just generally not behaving well. So that's a really great way to do that, and you can find samples to download from your Windows box, or for goodware from VirusTotal, or from Virus Resource for badware samples. And that is the end of my talk. I believe we have a ton of time for questions because my talk was shorter than expected. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to the moderator.
Thanks, Cooper. So the first question I think is that everyone has on their mind. So, well, it's a comment and a question. It sounds like you're doing some awesome work at the Threat Lab. Is there anything that we can do to assist you with your research?
Yeah, great question. So the best two things you can do are, I'll say three things. Actually, four. The first most obvious one is donate to EFF because we are a member-run organization. A majority of our funding comes from individual donors. And the second thing you can do is follow us and follow me and follow Eva on Twitter, because when we do need help identifying something or looking at something, we'll usually send out a tweet. The third thing you can do is get on GitHub and look at our projects and contribute to our open source projects. And the fourth thing you can do is get in touch with us. Especially if you come across samples in your work that you think are targeting at-risk groups, if you think are targeting civil society, we would love to see those. Or if you have intelligence on that, we would love to know about that. If you've reversed something that you think would be interesting to us, please send it our way. And like I said, we're not the world's best reversers. We're far from it. But we've found our niche, and we always need reversing help. So we will, we'll ask for that online. So if you have skills, please get in touch with me on Twitter, on email, and when I do need help with something, I'll be happy to reach out.
Thanks, Cooper. And also, next question: as you stated that you're a YARA, a newbie, a new person to YARA. So, what do you think is the best place to start getting into YARA and getting into YARA stuff?
Yeah, great question. Actually, I think that Awesome YARA is a great place to start. There's a ton of different resources there, so not just rule sets, but there's also links to a lot of different documents. There's a lot of different YARA tools and YARA helper tools linked there. I think that's a great place to get started. Yeah, that's where I would start. And of course, Twitter, follow all the speakers here on Twitter. That's a great way to get started with YARA. If you have a VirusTotal account, start writing rules for the samples that get sent directly to your email, right? For the sort of spam malware that you get, and start hunting for those on VirusTotal and improving your YARA skills that way. I think those are all great ways to get started.
Awesome. Next question: if someone knows of a new repository or source for YARA rules that's out there in the world and open source or open in some way, what's the best way to contribute it to your project?
Yeah, the best way is to file a GitHub issue. Right now, it downloads a list of files from Awesome YARA, but I would like to include more default rule sets besides that, especially if we find good, high quality, sort of niche rule sets. I think those are great. So the best way would be to file a GitHub issue or file a pull request, and we'll get it in there.
Awesome. Thank you, Cooper.